Why does nobody talk about the difference between a real estate transaction coordinator and a real estate assistant? I hate to break it to you, but they are not the same. Welcome back to another episode of Transaction Care. I am your host, your resident care coordinator, Lillian Hernandez, and this is Transaction Care. Let's get started. Before we take a deep dive into today's topic, do you know what a transaction coordinator is or does? If not, check out this video. I'll also put the link in the description below where I talk about what a transaction coordinator does. Okay, let's get started. Are these two jobs the same or different? They are two completely different jobs. How are they similar? It all depends on the job description, but they are similar in the sense where they facilitate tasks from beginning to end. The roles can also mesh if that's what the job description calls for. So depending on if you are working for one person, a team, or an entire office, it just depends on what they are expecting of you and what you've agreed upon from said job description when you first took on the job. So your tasks could range from requesting preliminary reports from the escrow company to possibly picking up someone's cleaners at the dry cleaners. So it all depends, and it's really important to be transparent upfront and ask a lot of questions before getting into both or either occupations. So what is the role of a transaction coordinator if they aren't the assistant? TC's main focus is prioritizing the transaction paperwork and making sure everything is compliant and audited correctly. TCs are accountable for the disclosures, timeline dates, and communication within your scope of work. TCs are responsible for maintaining all home-related paperwork, often using transaction management platforms like SkySlope. TCs do assist with certain aspects of the transaction, such as tagging disclosures, reports, and sometimes contracts. So pro tip as a transaction coordinator, when it comes to writing up contracts on behalf of your agent, in my opinion and in my business, I do not do this. I avoid this at all costs because I personally think contracts should be the full responsibility of the hired realtor in charge. One missed number, letter can cause a huge fiasco, and honestly, as a transaction coordinator, your job is to catch those things, not make those mistakes. It can also be a huge liability, so just tread lightly when dealing with contracts as a transaction coordinator. You can read them, you can audit them, but especially if you are not a licensed transaction coordinator, you definitely should not be writing them up. You should not be submitting offers, things of that nature. Just do your due diligence and, stay within your fiduciary duty and your scope of work, and you should be all good to go. And if you have any questions, always check in with your broker, especially if an agent is trying to pressure you to do something you don't do, or that's not within your scope of work, or you feel that this could be a liability. Go to their broker. Plain and simple. Have the broker deal with it and contact the agent directly. And you may want to consider either having a meeting with the agent you're working with, or considering cutting ties with them, because honestly, if they're pressuring you to do things you don't want to do or you don't do on a day-to-day basis that you are not willing to negotiate, then that may be a good time to reevaluate your relationship with that person. Also, keep in mind, transaction coordinators, that the agents are making a huge commission. So I know our responsibility is to do the paperwork, but that's also why they are in charge. They get a huge commission. They are getting a big check. And no, it's not all about money, but it is also about liability. So keep in mind, they're the ones taking the big check home, and your job is to look out for mistakes or point out any areas that may or may not need to be corrected or adjusted. So how is an assistant different from a transaction coordinator? Assistant's tasks are often broader and could range and involve tasks that Could involve meeting inspectors, stagers, title escrow officers, go to signing appointments. Like I said, possibly picking up dry cleaning. It all just depends on what you've signed up to do. Managing calendars, taking phone calls on behalf of the agent you're working for or the office. It just depends on who or how many people you're working with and what your duties are. You could also be managing their social media. You could also be setting up open houses, printing flyers, designing flyers. It's a whole broad range of tasks that you could be doing. You could also be checking in with the buyers and sellers and giving them updates as well. So it all just depends. You really have to read the job descriptions and ask a lot of questions, like I mentioned earlier, in order to get a full understanding of what job you are signing up to do. Can you do both? Can you be a real estate transaction coordinator and an assistant? Yes. But these two roles require a lot of time. So there's an opportunity cost for both occupations that you have to consider. If you are a transaction coordinator and an assistant, but you're only getting paid per file and there's no salary involved, you really have to factor in your numbers and your time, because auditing a file, managing a transaction file does take a lot of time. And if you're having to constantly be pulled away from that long list of tasks that we have to do, you're missing out on more opportunities to close more deals. So there needs to be some sort of separation or understanding in terms of, like I said, your job description and what you agree upon, especially with payment. So that was just an example. I don't know if that actually happens in real life, but just know that if you're only getting paid for the files, I think you should only be doing the files and not assistant work. That's just my humble opinion. So if you're doing either of these on more of a part-time basis, I could see it working, especially if you're being paid a salary or an hourly rate. So managing files could be the first few hours of the day, and then assisting could be after. Just depends on how you structure your hours in your day or what you agree upon. Also, one way it could work is if you are an assistant and a transaction coordinator for this one specific person, and you are only working with their files and their sales and listings. So in that sense, I could see it working. So just be mindful of your own time and your lifestyle and what you require and what you don't, and what's working and what's not. So when it comes down to it, everything is preference and availability. We all have different styles and lifestyles and work styles, financial needs, and skills. The only way to successfully achieve both or one of these jobs is to know how to set your own boundaries. So if you found this conversation helpful, please drop a comment, hit that share, like, follow, subscribe button wherever you are watching or listening to. I truly appreciate you. Your time is worth it. And when you have a moment, go check out this next video.